So, you know, they're like in something like that. That's a red right there. And then this is what I mean about trying to walk through this stuff. That's what it looks like. It's like, I know I'm getting too old. I don't know if I can do it anymore. But it's just so interesting, and it's so amazing to go up there. You know, there's moose and bears, and there's so much wildlife there, and there's so much going on. It's all the beaver, and it's like, you know, I mean, this big fire happened, and all these trees died, but it's more alive than I think than before. And then this is just same thing with only with bull trout, and bull trout are supposed to be really intolerant of fine sediment, but like I said, this is not fine sediment. It's a landslide, and basically a landslide kind of delivers a whole new river with all the different size classes of material. So from boulders to sand to silt. So as opposed to just a chronic fine sediment source that you might get from a road cut or something like that. So just showing that, I mean, what's the pattern there, you know, from when we've had this big fire, and it doesn't seem like it, in terms of reds, slowed them down. The size of the fish may be a little bit different, and that might have something to do with them the really big guys not being able to get there right now, because there's some really huge log jams in the way that they might not be able to get around. This is a twist where we haven't had any fires and recent big fires, and the bull trout, the twist supports a lot more bull trout. But just kind of similar pattern of, you know, just over time. And I think the twist, its orientation from east to west, it's a lot colder. So it's a smaller stream, and the bull trout really like it. It's kind of our bull trout hotspot is the upper twist. This is a picture of, a Google Earth picture of the Carlton complex fire. So it's kind of grayed out a little bit, and sorry about that, but kind of gives you an idea of how much grassland was really involved with the fire. It's the angle of it, you know, there is forest on each one, the north slope of each one of these, but this is a lot of open country that burned really fast. And here's the fish distribution with the burn intensity overlaid it. So not forgetting about the Okanagan, we've got the main stem of the Columbia and then steelhead going up the Okanagan here, and here's the Chilloist. And this red is, you know, kind of where the worst stuff is. This is Beaver Creek, so Fraser Creek and Highway 20 is somewhere in there, and then Benson Creek and Finley Canyon area. We got steelhead, chinook, bull trout in all of these, and then steelhead, bull trout up in here. So it kind of shows you where the fish that we're talking about tonight were when the fire happened. It happened on July 17th, and then the big storms happened around a month later, August 18th or so. So the spring chinook were all up here spawning, and basically weren't affected by the fire. They would have all been up here already. They could have had some fish still migrating through, but by the time the flooding and the sediment happened, which pretty much buried this part of the river, I mean, it literally buried it, they were all up here doing their thing. So next spring, their babies are going to come on down through here and probably do fairly well. This winter's been really, I mean, I think it's been terrible because it's been so warm and I like to ski, but from a river stream flow standpoint, the flows have been very nice level and have been doing a lot of work, cleaning up this mess and filling up the Columbia wells down. So steelhead, they spawn in the spring, so around, they're done in this part of the world in May. And so their eggs would have been would have hatched, and everyone would be up and swimming by the time the floods happened. But there is a fair bit of spawning that happens in this reach, and so with that flooding, a lot of those juvenile little newly emerged steelhead might have had a pretty hard time and might have had quite a bit of mortality there. Summer Chinook also like to spawn in this reach. They probably just avoided the area and went on up here and spawned up in here. And I don't know if anyone was out looking, but we had a huge run of fish this year, so that kind of helps too. There's such a big return, and they just all pig-piled up in here. Lamprey really like silt. And a lot of these areas along here are lamprey rearing areas where the amniocetes go and they bury into the silt for up to 4 years. And so I don't know what they would do if they can wiggle up through all that muck, or if it was bad news for them. This is what happened in Beaver Creek, and it really surprised me. And this is an amazing data set. From 2004 to 2013, the USGS went out and in this 500-meter reach on Vic and Carey's property, they collected all of this data very methodically and rigorously. This is a really gorgeous data set. So what it says is that we went back out in October, and this is all we found this year was 4 rainbow trout, and we should have seen closer to 400. So they pretty much all died, and this is the upstream of Fraser Creek. That's why I'm worried about the Volstead Road. So yeah.
How much of it is like the actual effects of the fires they're going through? That whole area, the riparian area, burned really hot, and I know the temperatures, like from what Ken told me, the temperature gauges he had were like skyrocketing, for at least moments or periods. And then how much of it, because that area got really flooded too. So I mean, it's hard to say like what caused it. Do you think it was like the worst?
Because I live there, so I go down to the creek after each one of these things. And fish died at every step of the way. So right after the fire, immediately after the fire, the next day there were dead fish that must have just gotten too hot for them. And the stream flows in Beaver Creek were really, really low. And so if there were fish caught in riffles and not in deeper water when that fire flashed through, they just died right away. So not all the fish died, only the ones probably between the pools, I'm guessing. And then about a week later, we had a really heavy rain that delivered like this black tar, the ash, that killed fish. It was just black. And then on August 21st, I guess it was, then we had the big flood, big rain event, and that was mud, and it was absolutely like frosting going down the river, and then I think that finished them off. So I think it was all of it. But so I think they'll come back really fast, but we'll find out, and we'll go back out and we'll measure again next year. So we'll talk again next year. But they can come down from above, because above the fire, in the old fire area, an old tripod area, that habitat was actually looking really beautiful. The water clarity was really good, very complex habitat because of all the burn trees and everything we've just talked about. And then parts of Beaver Creek that didn't burn. All of the fish are doing really well there, and so they can come down and recolonize this area. And then the fish can come up out of the Methow and recolonize it. So we should see them back next year, but I was shocked to see this kind of response. And part of what's going on here is, if all of those side channel habitats and everything are all kind of disconnected, and the beavers, 200 years ago, Beaver Creek was all beaver dams, and now it's not. And if it had been in that state, maybe we would have had more survival, because there would have been pockets of clear water off of the main channel, but there's just nowhere for them to go in there right now, with really low flows and just a single thread of channel. Yeah.
I just have a question about the chart there. I notice you have, I just don't understand it. I notice you have 3 other October samples down below 2014.
Oh, yeah.
And I see they're a different type of sample, but the numbers are a lot lower. And so I just wondered if you could explain that.
Yeah, so I put that up there because we sampled, that's really good, there's a scientist for you. We sampled this in October, and we did a slightly different version. This was a way more thorough version, but this was pretty darn thorough. I mean, we went through the whole thing and netted it off, and so this was a pretty thorough examination of this reach. But we did it in October, and all of these were in this time frame, so we wanted to make sure that the fish weren't just there because it was October. And so I put up some October data there that was a much simpler sampling method, more simple than this and way more simple than this. So it's just a subsample, a little teeny section of the reach instead of the whole thing. And so there we found these kinds of fish. So yes.
Jennifer, about how long is this reach? Like a half mile, quarter mile?
It's like 1,500 feet,
Okay.
about 500 meters.
Okay.
Yeah.
When they start their migration back from the ocean, will they just continue regardless of the situation? I mean, if they run into a bunch of turbidity, will they stop their migration and chill out for?
Yeah, that's a really, really good question. I don't know. I think if it was like frosting, like chocolate frosting, they probably wouldn't go there. But if it's, because they're always migrating during the steelhead or migrating into these areas when the flows are a little bit higher and they're kind of used to some turbidity. So if it's just a little bit cloudy, they would probably continue on and enter this, especially because the flows are up and it'll be easier for them to get in because it's a pretty small stream. But if it's really opaque, I would think they would avoid it. That's a great question. This is what it looked like at my house. There's our tractor. Poor thing. It got burned over, but it still works. This is what it looked like. We went for a walk the night before the fire up on the state land above our house, and this grass is like 2 feet high, and this is the fire in the background. In the way background, it was so eerie. It was really ominous. The next day we were dealing with that. Oh, this is the fire perimeter and showing the fire severity without all the fish stuff. So a little better view of the Okanagan side. These guys they got hit really, really hard. It's pretty sad. Yeah. I guess what I wanted to say about this one, I know why I put it in here, is just here's, the severe burned areas right here. And, when that rain happened, we had stuff coming out of here and here, and a lot coming out of here, and then up in here. So, interestingly, this area right here, some real high severity fire, but it has not reacted yet. So heads up in this section. If there's a really huge rainstorm and you're driving down the highway to Pateros, and you might be careful when you drive through there. Yeah, it's just south of Black Canyon. And this is a picture of the storm. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. You guys been hearing this term atmospheric river?
Yeah.
It's what that, I think that's what that looks like. Or what that is. We were in it. We were. Oh, and we were last week too. And then, word of the day. Everybody remember hydrophobicity. So I don't know if this was during that rainstorm on Beaver Creek, and you can see how windy it was. And can you kind of get the idea that that land is covered? So it's already been burned, and now it's getting flooded. Does it kind of look like it's covered with saran wrap?
Sure.
It's like that. It's like standing water on these slopes. That's how hard it was raining, and the soil is hydrophobic. Do you guys know what that means by now? You know, I've heard it enough. Anyone need to know what hydrophobic means? It means that it doesn't absorb the water. It repels water. The vegetation burned, and the oils in the vegetation volatilized and created a surface across the soil on the particles, so it can't absorb water. And then when the water falls so hard and so fast, it also doesn't have time. And so this is a condition on our shrub steppe apparently we'll be dealing with for the next couple of years. In the forest, it's going to last a little bit longer. It comes about when the soil dries out, so it won't be as much of a concern immediately in the spring, but in August, late July and August, when it really starts getting dry, is when that condition will come back again. Not to say that, you know, just super saturated soils, on the other hand, that's being too hydrophilic or water-loving, following the snow melt, with the water actually being absorbed could cause some problems as well. But this is the main worry, is these hydrophobic soils. And I guess our soils kind of do this anyway, even outside of fire. When it's really dry, they develop a hydrophobic character, made way worse by fire, and it's why one of the reasons why our hillsides reacted so violently to that rain following the fire. And this is a little bit of what that erosion looks like, where it starts. This is up in Finley Canyon. Those really cool colored, isn't that? So the rock, I think, is mineralized. That's just its natural color, but it's got all the vegetation burned off, so you can see it. It might also be a little bit of oxidation from the fire, but the rain came so hard, you can see it starting to form these gullies, like that. And then here, it's actually starting to slump. And then the tap turned off, so it actually didn't get very far, but if you know, you can kind of see this canyon starting to form. And then if I had the big fan of material down here, we call those alluvial fans.
It's so crazy to think all of that debris on Winter Lakes.
Yeah, it just starts out as little teeny rivulets, and it collects and it collects, and here's where this isn't the same area, but it's not at the bottom of that slope, but it's no, actually this is it's somewhere in that Finley Canyon area. You know, so then it collects in these smaller drainages, tributary streams, and starts building up more and more. And it looks like there was some kind of structure there that might have dammed it for a second, and then, you know, maybe a road. I don't know what that is there, but no, not one. And then, you know, just more of the same of these big, all those little rivulets, you know, just all collecting and then settling out, in this case on a road with a teeny little culvert. So remember that sediment balance thing I showed you early on, the scales of the water? And then, so an interesting thing happens with roads. So the road acts like a dam. And so when you have a dam, the water slows down, loses its energy, so that scale tips one way, and all that material that the water had the energy to carry drops out because the water is slowed down. And it drops out above the road. And then all of a sudden, all this water all of a sudden isn't carrying this big load. So it can do a lot of work. It's available, it has a lot of energy available to then pick up and carry a whole new load. And you see this time and time again. It drops it all out here, and then it degrades. So it aggregates here, and it degrades here. So it's not the same sediment that started at the top of the hill that's coming down to the valley floor. It's a new load. And here, this is in Chillowaste Creek. That's a really big culvert. The guy standing there, I mean, that's like a 3 or 4 foot culvert right there. And it did the same thing. It piled everything above, and then the water came below it and scoured. Had all that energy to pick up a whole new load. And again, deposit up above like a dam, and then scours it all out. And this is on Beaver Creek. So the other place where, so it can get sediment from doing that kind of thing of depositing and then picking up a new load. And then also when it drops a load of sediment, the water can pillow up or get diverted or pushed over and into the bank. And if there's a deposit there on the bank, it can cause the bank to slough in. And when you, next time you drive up Highway 20 towards the loop, take a look and you can see some really big places where the banks just failed and fell right into the creek. And a lot of that sediment that impacted Fraser Creek came not only from the very top of the hill, but it also that stuff deposited in the creek and then caused bank erosion that caused these big chunks of bank, huge, you know, like 10 feet tall, to drop into the creek. And then that creates a dam. So it's kind of like dominoes in a way. This is just on Beaver Creek and just kind of shows what all this really fine stuff gets out on the floodplain, where we like it, out of the creek, up in here, where it's going to help grow stuff. But you can also see where it probably picked up some new sediment out of the banks. And then when you get down to the main river, from the bottom of one of these things, see here we have some of that bank erosion right here. This, I think, it might have actually gotten in an old abandoned irrigation ditch and failed. But look at all this stuff. This is really nice stuff for the river. That's not so nice for the river. And thankfully, a lot of people cleaned up all the garbage, which is their heroes for sure. But this cobble and this coming out into the river just helps push things around and creates that habitat diversity that we're after. Not good for the highway, not good for the people that live there, but not bad for fish. This is the mouth of Beaver Creek. So Beaver Creek had all this stuff washed down it, and it piled in here, and it's created this waterfall that, if any of you are on the river and you take a look up here and let me know if this waterfall is still here. I'm imagining it's eroding back and away and it's going to disappear. And then as the Methow comes up, fish will be able to get in, but at the moment when this picture was taken back in October, that was a barrier and fish were not going to be able to get into Beaver Creek. But maybe that's not a bad thing at the moment. But I'd imagine that it'll wash away this spring if it hasn't already. This is on Beaver Creek. You know, we've been building a lot of log jams and wood things and putting wood back in the rivers. And this is one little place where we built a structure. Actually, we didn't do it. The Yakimas built it. And it caught all this wood. So it's kind of what we're after. And then this is a really nice deep hole under here. And so it just helped sort things out, you know, built a bar here, and just helps things from not being so straight and simple. Yeah, because we were worried, you know, oh, we just spent all this money building all these structures, and are they still any good, or did we waste all that money? And then, no, they're still there, and they're still working, and they're doing their job. So that was good to see. So getting towards the end here is back at my house, and this was right after the fire. And then this was in September. So, you know, those are a couple feet tall. And Beaver Creek is just right in here. So, I don't know what to think of it, but it's growing back. The deer are so hungry this fall, and so they're really munching this stuff down. But hopefully it can get out in front of them and become a nice big riparian area again. And last slide. So, but back to that idea of the circle and the life cycle of the salmon and their bodies being food, and where does it start and stop, and it's just continuous cycle. So it's really the beginning, and then there's a morel there. That's how do morels work? So their tree host dies, and then they send up a fruiting body, and start the next cycle, and then we get to go out and pick them and eat them. Thanks so much for listening to me.